So we're going to talk about oil, and we're going to talk about energy, and we're going to put this in a little bit of perspective because the President of the United States is saying that we have more oil in the United States, producing more oil in the United States than we need. I've been looking it up. And the reality is that we're producing 13.5 million barrels of oil each day in the United States. And that makes us comfortably number one because number two and number three, kind of tied, are Saudi Arabia and Russia. And also, if you're curious on how important Iran is, and they seem to be, at least in their own mind, very important, 3.5 million barrels a day versus, again, 13.5 for the US, 10 million for a couple of others. And so they're clocking in back down um, the list of oil producers. Now, 13.5 million barrels sounds like a heck of a lot of oil, and I'm sure it is. We're sitting in Oklahoma after all. We know a bit about that. But we're using 20 to 21 million barrels a day in the United States. Now, if we're producing, maybe my math is a little off here, but if we're using 20 or 21 million barrels and we're only producing 13.5 million barrels, that sounds to me like we're not producing more oil than we're, it's not excessive oil. Um, I can't find any explanation for that, except that we do export oil. And this has to do with the refineries. Some use heavy crude and sweet crude and Brent, and there are all kinds of different kinds of weight of oil. And so it's probably true that we are exporting oil while at the same time we're importing a bit of oil as well. We must be importing some amount of oil after all. Now, we know, or we have been told for quite a long recent times, how important, and we have to get away from fossil fuels, and we have to get over to wind and solar, and of course, those who are green fall out of love with nuclear, but nuclear is on its way back. Um, 3 Mile Island in the late 70s was on a nuclear plant in Pennsylvania at Harrisburg. And it kind of halfway melted down over the problem, and that took care of nuclear for quite a while. By the way, there was going to be a nuclear plant built at Black Fox over by Inola, and this was going to be public service of Oklahoma, and the public rebelled on that one for a couple of reasons. First of all, a nuclear plant in Oklahoma where we have oil. And the other problem was they were going to dip in pretty heavily into, you got to have a lot of water for a nuclear plant. And they were going to help themselves to a whole lot of water out of I'm not sure whether it's verdigris over there or whether it was the Arkansas. But anyway, um, public rose up and PSO backed off on that one. And in the end, there they were stuck with all that land, and they struck oil on it and made a lot of more money off of that. Anyway, the question is, what percentage of the United States energy today is produced is fossil, and how are we coming along with solar and windmill? And I don't think we have any nuclear plants. Well, the answer is we've already got about solidly more than a third of our energy is coming from solar, wind, and sources other than fossil. So the idea that we're not coming along in Oklahoma and in the United States towards renewables is, well, heck, it's just not true. Okay, so we went down to Venezuela and we kind of kicked a gentleman by the name of Maduro out, and we've been managing, Mr. Trump's been managing the oil out of Venezuela. That's only 1 million barrels a day. The world usage, to put it in perspective, is 101 to 105 barrels a day. And again, the United States is doing about 13-14% of the total production of oil in the United States. How much of that, back to Iran briefly, how much of Iran's 3.5 million barrels a day are they exporting? Well, the answer is they're exporting about about 500,000 to about 2.5 million barrels. Um, so I'm having a little trouble with all what this big to do is about. I'm going to explain this in a minute, over the Hormuz and over what Iran's doing. Well, the reason is because of an island called Karg Island, and that's where not only Iran is exporting theirs, but Saudi Arabia and probably Bahrain and a couple of others are sending their oil out through there, and it ultimately adds up to, and I keep saying this, so it might be true, that 20% of all of the oil uh, being exported and sent out around the United States, 20% goes through the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, I've been through the Strait of Hormuz. I've been to Abu Dhabi, or not Abu Dhabi, into anyway through the strait there, and I don't remember anything other than we sailed in and we sailed on a cruise ship. It was some years ago, and Dubai is right around the corner from the Strait of Hormuz, and everybody's really having having their problems. Okay, so you got Bahrain up there going through Strait of Hormuz is this 20%. Well, is exporting 175,000 barrels of oil. I mean, these are minuscule. Iraq is exporting 750,000. Kuwait, 1.5 million. And then you come back to the United States. Well, it's okay, but the North Sea. We talk a lot about the North Sea, which is off um, the east coast of the United Kingdom, Scotland. And North Sea has been producing along for quite a while, 2.7 million. Now, 2.7 million is a lot of barrels, I guess. But now let's come to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is still producing 400,000 barrels a day. Not many less than on a good day or a bad day that Iran is doing. Texas is 5.7 million barrels a day, and we got 400,000 up in Alaska. So the United States really is churning out a lot of oil, and that puts us in a position to you can run the world with how you massage oil. If you can control oil, oil is such an important commodity in everything. You have to have oil if you want to make this shirt. You're going to have energy to do all of these things. And when you get in polyester, many years ago, polyester were oil based. So we're going to need a lot of that oil, and we're going to continue to need it and use it. Let's make sure we understand who's where in the pecking order here. The United States is first, Saudi Arabia and Russia is second, and India is number three. They're churning out 5 million barrels of oil a day. And so now we come to China. China's using 16.5 million barrels of oil a day, and they're importing 11.5 million. Now, that means potentially that you can put a lot of pressure on China in terms of what, how good an actor or how bad an actor, how much trouble China wants to make. Now, you have to be careful when you get up to that, because during the run-up to World War II, which began in 1939, worldwide, the United States got into it in 1941, but leading up to World War II, the United States was elbowing back and forth with Japan, and we finally cut off metal to Japan. And one of the reasons, if you ever listen to the Japanese side, the Japanese will tell you in their history that the United States precipitated Pearl Harbor, that once you cut off their ability to get to oil and metals and so forth, um, that affected their economy in such a fundamental way that they went ahead and took uh, the rubber plantations in what is now Vietnam and old Indochina, and went on down searching for oil and so forth, and also um, uh, needed to neutralize the United States as tampering around out in the Far East in their view. Ergo, this leads back to how much do you want to push China around here? Um, because we've got a lot of toys and they've got a lot of toys. And what we don't want to do is start using our military toys on one another. And this is where it becomes, we need to be careful in this world. Does China produce any oil themselves? Well, actually, they do. They produce 4 million barrels. But if you're using 16 plus barrels, or 16 million plus barrels, and you're only producing 4, you're only producing 25% of what you need. And so, therefore, you don't have much. Uh, you don't have much room to not import oil if you're going to continue to do that. By the way, Canada is number 4. They're producing 5.5 oil, and we are we're not getting along with Canada as we traditionally have, and as we probably should. And Canada is a very substantial exporter of oil. They're only using 2.3 of their own 5.5 million, so they've got 3 millions of barrels of oil that they can ship off to and make a buck on. Now, what happens when you become like Iran has with the Strait of Hormuz and say, no more, you're going to have to pay us fees to get through here, and we're going to be bad actors here. Well, you can get away with that for a while, but the one of the strengths of the West and a free enterprise is we get things solved rather quickly. So there is something called in Saudi Arabia, an east-west pipeline. And by the way, Iran attacked and put it out of commission not long ago, but it's back. They got it moving. Saudi Arabia is already moving 7 million barrels a day through the Strait of Hormuz. Through their east-west pipeline. And oil companies are scrambling to find new sources of oil, which is everywhere in the world, by the way. There's a huge amount of oil everywhere. And go find these and start drilling there and essentially take the pressure off of the um, Strait of Hormuz, but also kind of neutralize the mischief that Iran is potentially able to engage in. That is not something which you can't get away with in extremis for very long unless you play nice. And it's been in Iran's interest to not mess with the Strait of Hormuz, but here they are. By the way, Strait of Hormuz, everybody says, it's 20 or 22 miles wide. No, it's not. It is, but there's a channel, twin channels actually, one in and one out into the Persian Gulf there, and there's just not a lot of room. So you could actually, if you drop a tanker into that, it blow one up and do what happened at the Suez Canal a few years ago. You could block the Strait of Hormuz without much difficulty at all. All right, that's it. We just want to talk about that a little bit. Put oil in a little bit of perspective because I went and researched it and took a whole piece of notes, here on it all. And the more I researched it, the more I still want an explanation on how you can say that we got more oil than we need when we're using 20 and we're only making 13. But the president sometimes is a little bit sloppy with with his truth. All right, let's talk about the war just briefly. Mr. Trump will tell you that he's just beat the living daylights out of them, that they're pretty much that they don't have a lot left, that they're bickering among one another because you have different factions there and so forth. All of this may well be correct. And it is true that you don't really know the day, for example, at the end of World War II, that the Japanese say, all right, we've had enough, we give up. And that happened rather quickly, within a week or so, and there was a big back and forth inside it. We know now from history that the different factions inside Japan in August of 1945 were saying, give up. The other thing, don't give up. And we were dropping nuclear bombs on them and so on. And the same way with Germany in May of 1945. It really wasn't clear when that German resistance, which by that time was in Berlin, was going to sort of melt away and become not an issue. And so that's where we are now. They may well have the ability to continue on for a very long time and create a lot of mischief, or they may well just crumble like or fall like a house of cards. But when you're sitting on the other side and analyzing this stuff, and let's remember, I ran an intelligence unit in Vietnam for psychological operations for better part of half a year, 2/3 of a year. So I know what intelligence looks like that we're gathering out there. And I also can tell you, and a lot of times it is not, it's just, I don't want to be crass, but it's not worth anything, okay? Or it leads you in wrong directions. Or the very worst of this is, you can convince yourself based on this, and this of what you really want to believe. And what you never want to be when you mixing it up with somebody who's after you is to be a Pollyanna. And I think the president of the United States, Mr. Trump, goes from being a kind of a hawk, where he says, we're going to bomb the civilization, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age, to, well, why don't we talk? Why don't we do a kumbaya? Why don't we can work this out. It's not like after the Rodney King riots or we can all get along together. Well, one thing's for sure, our media doesn't know, and but they're going to sound off, and they do sound authoritative because they have to in their own mind. So we're all going to, we're all sitting in the cheap seats here, waiting to see how this works out. And it's by no means clear to me how it's going to work out, because if you go and say, oh, well, why don't we have some negotiations? Why don't we talk to them? Well, when you're talking to somebody and negotiating with somebody, that means you want something and they want something. Well, going into this, the only thing we wanted a nuclear their capacity to build a bomb to go away. We wanted them to stop with the Houthis and the others and stirring up trouble around the world. And we wanted to, now we want the Strait of Hormuz open, which it was before. And so these are kind of simple demands. Go do it. What are we willing to give them in advance, in return? I mean, these guys in return, what? We're going to stop bombing you. We're going to stop killing people left and right, knocking down your buildings and so forth. We're going to leave that bridge over there alone. I don't know. On the other hand, I'm not sitting in Islamabad and negotiating with them. We'll talk again. That's pretty much it for today. Thank you.